Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
This is episode 3 of our 4-part series on optimizing men's health, products and services you may not know about, but need to. And today we're talking about liquid ketones. Now, you may be familiar with the terms ketogenic diet and ketosis. And ketosis is the process that happens when your body doesn't have enough carbohydrates to burn for energy. Most of the time, your body's burning carbs, glucose to supply its energy. But instead, in ketosis, you start burning fat. The process of ketosis makes things called ketones, which it can then use for fuel instead of glucose. Now, many of you guys have experienced ketosis through hardcore fasting or doing a fast mimicking diet like Prolon, which I talked about in episode 1 of this series. But let's face it, guys, fasting kind of sucks. You're hungry and cranky for a few days before your body finally switches over to the state of ketosis. And if you've ever arrived at that place of ketosis, it's this beautiful, clean, consistent energetic state where you feel alive, alert, and mentally sharp. Well, what if instead of going through the grueling process of fasting, you could drink liquid ketones and get enough ketones in your body in 15 minutes to experience a similar energy that would take you multiple days of fasting to achieve? Well, that is the topic of conversation that we're having today with Michael Brandt, co-founder and CEO of HVMN. And that stands for Health Via Modern Nutrition. And specifically, we're doing a deep dive on their liquid ketone drink called Ketone IQ. Now, HVMN has a pretty impressive list of investors and advisors that include Andreessen Horowitz, Marissa Mayer, the former CEO of Yahoo, the late Tony Hsieh, who's the founder of Zappos, Joe Montana, the Hall of Fame quarterback. HVMN has a $6 million contract with the U.S. Department of Defense. They do work with top Tour de France cycling teams, and they've nicknamed Ketone IQ the Navy SEAL juice for how many Navy SEALs are using it. So in this episode, we're going to go into a beginner level conversation around what a ketone is, how it provides energy, the difference between ketone-driven energy and glucose-driven energy, and how they feel different in your body, why glucose has kind of that up and down feeling, while ketones are much more sustainable and even. I'll ask the tougher questions around, does Ketone IQ affect your sleep? Can you use ketones every day? Are there any deleterious effects if they're used over a course of time? When before a workout should I take it? And all of the other relevant applications of Ketone IQ. Brian and I have both been provided with a bottle of this before we started recording, and we both really enjoying the experience. So enjoy this conversation on liquid ketones for clean, sustained energy, featuring CEO Michael Brandt. So, Brian, is it true that you didn't have a thing to eat last night until 9 p.m.?
What the hell just happened? A few weeks ago, I get a clear liquid bottle in the mail, and I have no idea what it is. Dominic calls me, asks me if I got the goods. I did. I tried them this week, and I've tried them, or last couple weeks actually, at various times. Here's what I did yesterday. Michael, I'm hoping you can help out here. I took my bulletproof coffee in the morning, per usual. That was at 7 a.m. At 11 a.m., I took this ketone supplement, which we'll talk about here shortly. I wasn't even thinking about food, and it was 8 p.m. I finally forced myself to eat something at night, and I had energy all day. I don't know if that's a good place to start, but that's what happened yesterday, and I was freaked out.
Well, Michael, welcome to the show with that intro. What the heck did Brian drink? Talk to us about, HVMN. Talk to us about Ketone IQ and how you came up with this thing and why it's taking the world by storm.
Well, first of all, Dominic and Brian, thanks for having me on, and thanks everyone for tuning in. It's great to be here. And real quick, before I jump into it, it's like, who the hell is this guy who's talking to me about ketones? So I'm Michael Brandt. I'm from Chicago originally. I studied computer science at Stanford. My first job out of college was in tech. I worked at Google, YouTube. I got really into biohacking and became a pro marathon runner, started this company around HVMN, health via modern nutrition. We launched this product called Ketone IQ. We do a ton of work with elite performers. So our first big project with this drinkable ketone, which we'll go a lot more into, was the US DoD, Special Operations Command. We have a $6 million project with Special Operations Command. So what we're talking about here is, we affectionately call it Navy SEAL juice. It's cutting edge of performance nutrition. It's super interesting, right? The US DoD is not throwing $6 million around it like acai berries. There's a lot, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in the health wellness space in general. And some of it's more objective, measurable, impactful than others. I think what we're doing is really neat. Happy to unpack it more. But yeah, what you just drank yesterday is something called Ketone IQ. It's a ketone drink. It's a pure ketone. The same way that if you do fasting or a low carb diet, your body will make a ketone. We figured out a way to take that same ketone, put it into a drink so that when you drink it, you directly get that ketone in your bloodstream. So a lot of people like this ketogenic diet, or they like fasting because they get this like razor sharp sense of focus. And now we just have that in a bottle. And you're absolutely right. Like, it's been studies shown that elevating your ketone levels suppresses your appetite. So everything you're saying there, Brian, checks out.
Give us the ground level on what is a ketone. So understanding that people want this and there's a diet around this ketogenic diet, what is it? I mean, is it a sugar? Is it a protein? Is it a carbohydrate? Like, why do we want this in our body?
That's a great question. So it's none of those. And that's what makes it really interesting. And we think about it as a new nutritional primitive. So ketones are a source of calories that are not a carb, not a protein, not a fat. So those are the three macronutrients. Macronutrient being defined as it's on the nutrition facts panel of any food that you eat. And there's three of them. There's fat, protein, and carbs. And they have a certain amount of calories per gram. Everything else is micronutrients, right? Like vitamin B, vitamin D, that's all micronutrients, minerals, all that. There's three macronutrients. And what makes ketones really interesting is that they're a fourth macronutrient. They're not one of those three other ones. They're not a carb, not a fat, not a protein. Your body has always had ketones present. For 300,000 years, as long as there's been humans, there's been ketones. Actually, other species also make ketones. Your body naturally makes ketones. And arguably, ancient humans, prehistoric humans, had higher levels of ketones than modern day humans because there was no frosted flakes on the savannah, right? Like when you're eating a lot of processed carbohydrates, that elevates your blood sugar, that stops your body from making ketones. Your body makes ketones naturally when you're in a low carb state, or when you're fasting, or when you're moving around a lot. In any of those contexts where you're burning down your carb tank, your body's going to start turning fat into ketones. And ketones, unlike fat, can cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's a super key adaptation that we have. Normally, your body can run on blood sugar. Your brain can run on blood sugar, aka blood glucose. But when you're running low on blood glucose, which is totally normal, like that's the thing, is like, I think in the modern context, it's like this weird thing to be running low on blood glucose, but like there wasn't always, a 7-Eleven on every corner and just overabundance of processed carbs in the ancient context of humans. So humans used to have more ketones floating around. And our whole mission is help people to return to that ancient, healthy, natural metabolic state that feels amazing. You feel really, really dialed in. You don't feel sleepy and sluggish in the middle of the day. You're not like sleepy, the way you're sleepy 90 minutes after having pancakes or a big sandwich or something. And so our whole mission is help people return to this more sharp, dialed in metabolic state. And doing all these things, exercise, low carb, also it's really nice tool in the toolkit to be able to directly drink a ketone.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I heard you say when you were on the Ben Greenfield podcast was with the drinkable ketones, it hits your system kind of as quickly as say like coffee would, right? Mm-hmm. You drink coffee in 15 to 20 minutes, you start to feel the caffeine. In 15 to 20 minutes when I take, and I'm on Ketone IQ right now, I can feel the effect and the energy. Maybe you can talk a little bit about like how the energy of ketones feels in a typical human's body versus, glucose-based energy. And I know we say glucose kind of has that roller coaster wave of, you have the boom and the bust, the highs, the lows. This is why you have maybe like the 2 p.m. crash. You eat some sugar, you get high for another hour and a half, and then you crash again. When it comes to ketosis and the energy that's derived from ketones, it feels much more stable. You don't have like the high highs, and it seems to sustain a little bit longer. Is there anything that you might add or edit to that?
Yeah, I think that's really well articulated, Dominic. And what's going on behind the scenes there, I think everyone should know this. Like whether you decide to go and drink a ketone or not, I think it's time for everyone to know just Bio 101 on what happens when you eat. something. And normally what happens when you eat a sandwich, something that has a bunch of carbs in it, is those carbs will get digested. They'll enter your bloodstream. You'll have elevated blood glucose, which, by the way, you can measure. It's getting even easier to measure. There's companies like Levels, NutriSense, which I'm sure a lot of people have at least heard of or have had a friend who has done it. I was wearing continuous glucose monitors like this back, like, I don't know, 6-7 years ago before. I had to order it on like European eBay because it wasn't street legal in the US yet. But there's really cool companies like Levels that have made it really frictionless to go and sign up and check them out. So when you eat something that has carbs, you can see your blood glucose elevate. And then what happens is your body will release insulin. A lot of people may have heard of insulin, but maybe not sure what it does. Insulin addresses the blood glucose that's present. So when your blood glucose goes up, your pancreas will release insulin to go address that glucose. And it will either try to metabolize it or it will pack it away. And when you pack it away, that adds body fat that sometimes it packs into your muscles for use later, or you use it right away. And here's a key thing that I think everyone should know, which is that if you do this too much, if you have too many spikes in blood glucose, too many spikes in blood insulin, eventually your insulin stops working. And that's called type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. And that's the number one mortality factor in the United States. That's the number one reason why most people die. It's also a major comorbidity of COVID. And it's really similar to like noise-induced hearing loss, where you can imagine if you're listening to loud music on headphones all day, every day, like eventually, after decades of that abuse, your ears are going to stop working super well. It's the same thing with your metabolism. It's not like a one-time thing. Oh, you have a pack of Sour Patch Kids, you get diabetes the next day. But if you continually abuse your metabolism, if you continually spike your blood glucose, spike that insulin, like your body eventually becomes desensitized to insulin. It doesn't know what to do with it. And then you really have energy problems. You really have a hard time feeling good. Like, it's not healthy to have just like ambiently high blood glucose, but if your insulin isn't working, that's what ends up happening. So part of what makes ketones interesting, part of why people say they feel different on it, is ketones are non-insulinogenic. Ketones don't cause a spike in insulin. They just enter your bloodstream, then they get naturally processed. And with glucose, right? So you have that insulin spike, it addresses the glucose. And then when that insulin is still around, that acts as a hunger hormone to tell your brain to eat again. Because your brain is basically like, okay, I have all this insulin and no glucose. Okay, I must be hungry. So that's why sugar is addicting, because like you eat sugar, spikes your blood glucose, which in turn spikes your blood insulin. When your glucose comes back down and the insulin is still around, your body's like, okay, give me more fuel, give me more kindling to throw on the fire. Ketones don't have that effect. They don't trigger a insulin response that makes you hungry 90 minutes later. You don't get like hooked on it. And the same is true with MCT oil powder, right? Same is true with like healthy fats, as people are doing a low carb or ketogenic diet. Like when you eat an avocado or an egg or MCT bulletproof coffee, you get a source of calories, but you don't have that spike of glucose, spike of insulin. So that's why even if you're not like full on keto diet, like I don't do full keto diet. I don't think that was necessarily what ancient humans did either. I think there was berries and grains around, but I do recommend, lower carb diet. I think that replacing your morning Frappuccino sugar bomb with bulletproof coffee is probably a great way to start the day. Like, why would you start your day? If given all the choices in the world, like, why would you start your day by like blowing out your blood glucose, blood insulin? Like, if it's your mom's birthday and you're going to have pancakes, like by all means go for it. But on like your standard Friday morning, got shit to do today, like dialing in your performance for a productive day, like there's just some Cliff's Notes on how to set yourself up for a successful day on your average work day.
Michael, talk to us about some of the use cases here, because it sounds like ketones could be used in a lot of different situations. So whether it's appetite satiation or energy increasing or mental focus or recovery or muscle building. I heard you talk on one podcast about ultra marathoners. And so it seems like there's just a lot of applications for which this could apply. And I'm hoping to maybe narrow that down. So the one that we're talking about right now is, hey, I've got a 9 to 5. I'm working. I'm trying to stay focused all day long. What would this do for me, and like how should I be taking it?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about ketones and why are there all these different applications is that everyone's doing metabolism all the time. It's the core process that your body does to create energy. So whether you're an elite cyclist, like we do a lot of business with Tour de France teams. Some of the most dialed in endurance freaks on the planet. They're doing like 100, 200 mile bike rides up the mountain in low oxygen environment for like 3-4 weeks straight, like absolute animals, very dialed in on their nutrition. But at the same time, an older person who's trying to address cognitive decline, they also may be having metabolic dysfunction that might be causing or contributing to that situation. Or I don't know, someone's trying to lose weight. Like your metabolism is also involved there. So like, we're all doing metabolism all the time. And so when we talk about ketones as a nutritional primitive, it's like this building block. It's like, imagine you invented like a new color of Lego brick. There's all these things. You can make a spaceship out of it. You can make a car. You can make a horsey. You can make like all these things out of this new type of Lego brick. That's what's so fascinating about it. That's why I jump track and, got some of the smartest people on the planet working all together on this, is because it's like this fundamental building brick that touches a lot of things. It's not just like the new hot thing for triathlete. It's like core metabolism. Yes, we do a lot of work. Like I would say like the sphere of our work is with these high performers, with U.S. Special Operations Command. Former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is on our board. That's the highest ranking military officer in the country. He reported to Bush and then Obama. We do a lot of work with high performing special operators. But we also do a lot of work. We just submitted a study for traumatic brain injury. And we do a lot of work with Alzheimer's research, where both of those deal with your brain's inability to uptake glucose, which if you're tracking, it's like glucose and ketones are kind of these separate pathways into your cell, into your mitochondria to create ATP, create cellular energy. If people remember in ninth grade bio, like you want ATP, Krebs cycle, you want to create energy inside of your cell. And ketones and glucose are different ways to do it. A lot of issues like traumatic brain injury, concussions, Alzheimer's, they interfere with your brain's ability to metabolize glucose. So having ketones as this different molecule, different pathway, requires less oxygen to metabolize. It offers a way to recover cognitive function, recover elasticity in these contexts where your brain is maybe not super able to use glucose. So we're talking about totally different things here, right? We're talking about Tour de France riders. They're having ketones plus carbs because like their way of thinking about it is, I want to be like a Toyota Prius. I want the gas and I want the battery. So like give me the bananas, the goo shots, the Mortons, and let me get ketones. Let me just have everything going into the cell all at once. People who are trying to address Alzheimer's disease, if their doctor's putting them on a ketogenic diet and then they're drinking ketone IQ to supplement that, it's totally different use case. But where it's similar is like kind of the stem of the thought tree on this, which is that we're all doing metabolism all the time. So I hope that answers your question. Like I know your question was like, how do we narrow this down? And like the answer is kind of like, well, it's got a lot of breadth of applications. That's a lot of what we're working on, is how do we take this magic molecule and instead of selling it to everyone all the time for everything, how do we narrow it down to the most impactful? Imagine you invented caffeine, right? Like who would you go and sell it to, right? Like a billion cups of coffee are drank every day now. Imagine it didn't exist and you invented it. Like where would you start?
Right. Where would I start? Probably people who are very compulsive and and addictive. But one of the things that I found so interesting, and I would love to talk a little bit more about these high performance teams that are using Ketone IQ. Before we go there, you have some pretty significant investors, right? Between investors and advisors, between Andreessen Horowitz, you have the former CEO of Yahoo, Marissa Mayer, the late Tony Hsieh was, I believe, either an investor and advisor, and then Joe Montana, Hall of Famer.
Yeah, the GOAT.
Right? Well, the former GOAT, Tom Brady, I believe, has taken the crown there. Depending on what circle you run in. But what did those groups see in what you've developed with Ketone IQ that caused them to be investors and advisors?
In a nutshell, I think people want to get involved with the thing that is revolutionary, not just evolutionary. Like people don't want to just see like the slightly better shoe or coffee mug or whatever. People want to see hey, like it might be like a wild ass idea. Like it might not work, but if it does work, it's a $10 billion concept. I think when investors tend to, especially at the venture scale, like super high level, they want to polarize. Like I went to school at Stanford and baked into Silicon Valley. And like it's in the water there that people have seen like Google, right? Like, oh, I invested $100,000 into Google and now I have 6 yachts. It's like these outsized outcomes happen. And like a lot of people didn't think Google was a good idea, right? There's all the stories for every Tony Hsieh Zappos success story. Like Tony Hsieh himself, like had a hard time getting money at the start for people to invest in his buy shoes online company. So like all the great ideas look a little kooky at the start. So in a nutshell, I would say like go for things that look a little crazy, that like they might not work. Like they might look like a toy or a joke. Like Snapchat looked like a joke. Instagram looked like a joke. Uber, like I've never ordered a black car before. This business model sucks. Like all the great best ideas, they start out looking a little bit like head scratcher. Like most, I don't know, for the last, like we've been working on ketones for like 4 or 5 years here. And very early days, outside of the like Navy SEALs, everyone was like, yo, what are you doing? Like, what is a ketone? What is it? Like what, like,
yeah. So why is that changing now? Why now is that starting to take off?
Because of hardware. because of, and I'm wearing my Oura ring right now, I have my Garmin, like I was talking about levels earlier, because you can actually measure your heart rate variability throughout the day, right? To see a indicator of stress. You can actually measure your sleep quality. You can actually measure directly, you can measure your blood glucose. They're coming out with a continuous ketone monitor too. Like you can directly measure your markers of metabolic health, and just more generally, you can measure biomarkers of how you're doing in life. And so I think we were promised the nutrition of the future, and we got acai berries and a bunch of marketing. And now there's hardware where people can objectively measure, hey, what is this doing? How is this affecting you or not in an objective way? And I think that's separating the wheat from the chaff, where it's like, hey, I don't know what this like pomegranate juice does for me. Actually, it's got a lot of sugar in it. Like maybe it's not curing my cardiovascular disease, right? Like versus you have a ketone. It's not versus, it's just like people only have so many dollars and attention to spend on things. And when you see a ketone that, hey, I drink it and directly it elevates my blood ketone levels in 15 minutes. And wow, there's all this interesting research around how ketones can be metabolically efficient and create less oxidative stress as you're metabolizing them, right? Like, wow, this thing is actually doing something to shift marker of metabolic health. Again, I can see it objectively in my own self. So I think that's the answer to why now. And like, why not a decade ago? Is I think a decade ago is like, yeah, why am I drinking this semi-expensive, weird tasting ketone thing? I'll just have no, thank you. I will have acai berry, please.
I think one thing, I mean, I look at my cabinet up there in the kitchen and, I take magnesium for nighttime. During the daytime, I take my B vitamins and my ashwagandha and this and that. And a lot of it is on faith, because I can't say I take a pill and I feel it. That said, when I have caffeine, when I have a coffee, I'm feeling that shit in 15 minutes.
Yep.
And this is one of the first supplements more recently that I feel an immediate effect. Now, some things I feel an effect over a period of time. Some of it, I'm just hoping that this is going to make me live longer, live a better life. But ketones, it seems that there's a pretty immediate effect. So whether you can read the results on some piece of hardware like a levels, or you're just feeling it, this is new. I mean, outside of, do you guys remember Ultimate Orange?
What is this?
This is going back to mid to late 90s. And it was a pre-workout drink. It had Mao Hung in it, which was the herbal equivalent of some sort of upper. And this shit tasted awful. I burped the entire workout, but you could feel it, right?
Ripping a bicep
ketones, ripping the bicep curls. But ketones, there's an immediate effect to it. And so what I'm curious about is if I feel the immediate effect, like Mao Hung, like caffeine, but a different feel, then going back to Dominic's question, why now? Like, why are we just hearing about a fourth macronutrient, not in ninth grade, but right now?
Well, first of all, the human body's always made ketones. So it's like, in a sense, it's like, did Columbus discover America? Or was America always there? Like, ketones have always been around. We've made some discoveries recently. We're pointing the flashlight at something that always existed, is how I think about it. And more specifically on it, that scientists started looking really at ketones a century ago. In the early 20th century, that was the first time when people were looking at the ketogenic diet. So the first medical application of ketones was, there were these patients, these child patients with instances of seizures. And the doctors had this idea that, hey, like, it seems like their brain's not metabolizing correctly. What if we put them onto a low carb ketogenic diet, get them to elevate their blood ketone levels? And sure enough, they saw they were able to reduce instances of seizures. And this was in like 19-teens. 100 plus years ago. So over the 20th century, people looked at ketones in all sorts of different ways. There's a lot of fasting studies done. There's some really seminal work done at Harvard around fasting, that people fasting for, it was interesting. They had like seminary students, like people studying for the priesthood. I guess we're really good at fasting. There's a big study done at Harvard around seminary students fasting for many, many days and looking at their ketone levels and other things. In the early 2000s, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Association, which people may have heard of DARPA because they've done a ton of frontier tech. They were the early ones to develop the internet, right? When it was like 6 computers super glued together from like MIT and Berkeley and UCLA and stuff. They get into things like decades before it usually hits the market. So in the early 2000s, they deserve the credit. Honestly, like DARPA and NIH, National Institute of Health, in the early 2000s, they had this program, which was called Operation Metabolic Dominance, which always makes me, it always makes me crack up when I remind myself of that pretty badass name. Operation Metabolic Dominance. The idea was to enhance warfighter performance in physically and cognitively demanding missions. They looked at a few other things besides ketones, but ketones were the standout that really like took the cake there. And they showed a way to isolate a ketone, to make it from scratch And they also show some of the basic science around it, that your body can metabolize a ketone. We knew that we could metabolize a ketone, but when they were able to isolate it like that, they showed that you're able to metabolize it while using less oxygen. So you're able to turn it into the same amount of cellular energy as glucose, but it requires less oxygen to do so, which starts being really interesting for when you're really tired or you're pushed to your limits or you're in a low oxygen or high altitude environment. So DARPA did all this really interesting research in the early 2000s with the NIH, and then it kind of sat on a shelf and gathered dust. I don't really have a great explanation for it besides it was very expensive and it was like extremely gnarly tasting. The science behind it, the core science behind it was super cool, but it was missing that like productization. Like no one had really gone in there and said, hey, what if we like put 5 really smart people, lock them in a room for like 18 months and figure out how to make this actually taste good and actually figure out how to like iron out every aspect of the supply chain process. And there's a lot of complexity in the supply chain that goes into it and the formulation that goes into it. And that's where we came in. We're in 2016, 17. That's when the keto diet was first really trending. Like, oh my God, Kim Kardashian doing it, Tom Brady, bulletproof coffee was really taking off. We saw that, and that's where my co-founder and I were both computer science guys. We had met in undergrad, and we just were like, hey, how close to the root can we go on this? How first principles can we go on this? Everyone's talking about the ketogenic diet, making avocados and eggs and all that all day. Like, what is this ketone? Like, what's going on here? And that's where we unearthed, hey, like DARPA actually looked at this. Like, there's actually a way to do this. There's a proof of concept out there. No one's actually productized this and taken it to market and sold it in a bottle. So in 2017, we launched the first ever product, the first ever ketone drink. And it was super expensive. I have it right here. It was $30 a shot and it tasted like super crazy. And really our major customer on that was US DOD and then elite cycling teams and like a certain set of like baller execs. Like if you're super baller exec and you have an important board meeting or whatever, if money's no issue and you're on your way to your Soul Cycle class, that was basically the set of people. Like I could barely afford it with the employee discount. And I'm like, big marathon runner. And I'm really into this kind of stuff. So that was cool. That ran its course. Version 1 ran its course for a couple of years. And then it was just been hard at work and figuring out how can we simplify things, iron things out in the supply chain, in the formula, how can we make it taste better and way cheaper? So that's where in January of this year, January of 2022, we launched version 2, which we're calling Ketone IQ, where we figured out a way to make it way more affordable. We dropped the price by 2/3. We made it taste way more palatable. So it's now finally in that room. I'm not going to say it's like accessible to everyone. It's $4 a serving. So it's like the price of a cup of coffee. So it's not astronomical anymore. It's not totally affordable. I think we still have more work to do there for sure. But it's like, it's getting towards that realm where it can feel like a nutritional primitive for everyone. If you have athletic greens or if you have CBD or something, it's like we're in that ballpark of if you're into this kind of thing, it's accessible.
So this makes sense. So 100 years ago, we're just starting to look at the science of what ketones are and what works. It took us this long to get to a point where the price comes down, where the taste is okay, right? You've had a few years now of experimenting with the elites, and now it's coming down to it's more accessible, right? This is a similar trajectory for a lot of different products out there. And so it makes sense that this is now available. $4 a shot is very different than $30 a shot if you're doing this once a day. So
it reminds me of, you ever see those pictures? This is before my time, but I've seen the pictures of like the initial hard drives where it's like a whole ass truck.
Sure.
It's like 4 kilobytes or something. It's like,
yeah.
It's like they have a bunch of like brainiacs from MIT, like with a giant truck, giant like hard drive on a pallet. And you look at it, it's like smaller than your memory card for your DSLR. It's like, it's that kind of thing. It's like, well, why didn't they just have why didn't they just put it on Dropbox? Like, why didn't they just, it's like the engineering, I'm sure a lot of people can respect, takes time. Like you have the proof of concepts and things evolve from there. There's been breakthroughs as well on our end. The biological process of making ketones. There's a lot going on in synthetic biology where you can basically genetically modify yeast so that you can feed it sugar, and then the byproduct of that yeast is the target molecule. So this can be used for all sorts of things. This can be used for a lot of functional nutritional stuff, pharmaceuticals, all sorts of things. And the science on that has evolved a lot over the last decade as well. So it's definitely a whole ecosystem of technologies that have evolved to help us get to this place for sure.
Yeah, let's talk about how certain men may use ketone IQ, right? So I'm just thinking about specific guys in our community, right, who are in our masterminds. And let's just pick one guy who, let's say he's an entrepreneur and he runs his own business, and that's the most important thing for him. He's got a lot of stress, packed schedule throughout the course of a day, works 12 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. How might that guy use ketone IQ? How and when?
Yeah, first of all, respect to that guy. I mean, I think we're all that guy, and I think it's not easy to be working at that level for an extended period of time. And at that point, you're basically an endurance athlete. There's only so many people who can compete in like the NFL or the NBA, but I think a lot of us are trying to be that level of professional, that level of excellent at our job. And you can think about like the same number of reps, like the same amount of practice that Tom Brady or LeBron or whomever is putting into their craft. Like, I think it's a lot more common that you see people doing that, but it's like, instead of throwing tight spirals, they're putting together Excel spreadsheets and they're putting together podcasts and really refining their craft there. And I think I respect it. I think, just side note on that, I think there's this like vein in the culture right now, sometimes, of people like being anti-productivity or like overly anti-capitalist or something, to where they're like sandbagging themselves. Like, they don't feel like, some people, they don't even want to hustle, or like they think of hustling as like, I should not be measured on my productive output, which is true to a degree. However, it's also the system we live in. And I think it can actually be very rewarding to do. Like, it's very cool to build a company. It's very cool. Like, if you can be the architect on the Golden Gate Bridge, or if you can write the next great American novel, like, that's really cool. I think we all got, I don't know if people have seen like Fight Club. Like, I think we got like pulled into this vibe where like work is bad, or like you're working for the man, or you're just like trading your hours for check from the boss, or, you know, even if you're an entrepreneur, you're still just grinding away hours. I think it's like super cool. It's to be celebrated. I think everyone's an athlete. Everyone's a hero of their own journey. And I think that people should be proud of it, and they should find whatever tools that they can, software tools, hardware tools, nutrition tools, to be excellent at their craft. So coming back to, okay, so how specifically to use ketone IQ in a day-to-day, I just start out the day with it. Like, start out the day with a cup of coffee, shot of ketones, athletic greens, like whatever is your kind of morning ritual. Throw ketones into the mix there.
Sorry to interrupt, but you don't see any conflict with using caffeine and ketones at the same time?
They complement each other really well. They synergize really well together. And they're totally different, right? Caffeine is a hormone blocker. It blocks your adenosine, it blocks your sleep receptors, so you feel less sleepy when you drink caffeine. Caffeine's acaloric, right? It's not a macronutrient. There's no calories in caffeine. It just has these signaling effects. Ketones are totally different. Like, ketones they're not this like subtle hormone that's like triggering a shift in your body. They're a macronutrient. They're supplying your cells with energy. So people are already doing like a semi-similar way. If people are doing bulletproof coffee, it's like you're having coffee and then you're having butter and MCT, which you're hoping your body will quickly convert into ketones. That's the whole premise of bulletproof coffee, is that, what is an MCT? What is medium chain triglyceride? We sell these too. Medium chain triglyceride is a form of fat that your body can most readily turn into ketones because of without going into too much detail. It's like the type, MCT is a medium chain triglyceride. Because of the carbon chain length on an MCT, your body can easily turn it into a ketone. But even it's like 10% as effective as actually just drinking a ketone. So I think we're standing on the shoulders of giants here, where I think bulletproof coffee like laid the way, because it's like the next best thing that you could do to, you know, get some caffeine and you get some MCTs and your body's like going towards ketone production. I think that's super cool. And I think that a lot of people like the way that they feel on it. And if on top of your bulletproof coffee, if right on the side of it, you take a shot of ketone IQ, it's like you're basically jumpstarting your body's ketones, and also still have the bulletproof coffee, right? Like, you still have the caffeine and then the MCTs and grass-fed butter and all that good stuff. Coconut oil.
That wouldn't over ketone us? It's not one or the other?
It's not one or the other. You're not going to over ketone yourself by doing that. You'd have to do a lot. Your body knows what to do with ketones. I think it's the thing. It's like, it's not, in a sense, it's like caffeine is weird. Caffeine does not naturally occur in your body. Like, caffeine, you got to go to squeeze the hell out of a coffee bean or a tea leaf, make this dirty bean juice out of it.
And don't talk about caffeine that way.
Sorry for anyone's feelings. Yeah. But and then it does something in our body. And, you know, caffeine's fine, healthy, all that. Like, it stands the test of time. Like, we've been drinking caffeine for a long time. I don't have an issue with caffeine. I'm just saying that the ketones is something that your body makes already, always like knows what to do with it. Like, I did a 7-day fast. My co-founder and I and a couple other people on our team did a 7-day fast. And it's cool because along the way, like day 3 or 4 of your fast, you measure your blood ketone levels and you can see you're at, oh my God, 3-4 millimole per liter. That's the unit of measurement for ketones. And drinking ketone IQ, drinking a shot or two will elevate your ketones, but like it's going to be to that same approximate level of where you get after multiple days of fasting. So your body knows what to do with it, basically.
It sounds like this is a shortcut, right? This is a faster, even more efficient way to put your body into ketosis. So if we use the tools that we have today, fasting, if we have MCT oils, we have these other things to put us in, low carb diets to put us into ketosis. It sounds like, well, we could do all that, and it may take days or a fast for 7 days, or we could take a shot of this stuff to put our bodies in the same state in which we're getting that really healthy fuel.
Exactly. And that was the initial premise of why Special Operations Command was even interested in this. There's one thing, when you say the word shortcut, there is one thing I do want to address on it, which is that like, I would be remiss to not say like, you can't like have a donut and then ketone IQ. Like that's like a too good to be true shortcut. If you have something that's like bad for you and then you have ketone IQ after, it's like, you just had a donut and ketone IQ. Like you didn't you're not like crushing it. You know what I mean? Like,
okay. So first of all, thank you for saying that. That's very helpful for me because I probably would have tried that. So thank you. I would have done a cookie, not a donut though. So 2, tell us what happens. Like if I was to eat a cookie and then pound some IQ, feel good about myself, what happens? Am I just negating it all out? Is it I'm wasting $4?
It's not that you're negating it all out. It's that you just had a lot of calories because the cookie has calories and ketones still have calories. The point of ketones is that those calories themselves are very healthy and satiating. There's a big study that was done around ketones and ghrelin levels. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone, where if you feed people the same amount of sugar versus ketones, say 100 calories of sugar, 100 calories of ketones, people feel significantly more satiated off the ketones. And this is when it's like double blinded. The researcher doesn't know, the participant doesn't know. People feel significantly more satiated with the same amount of calories from ketones. And also when they objectively measured their ghrelin, which is hunger hormone, the ghrelin was significantly suppressed in the participants who drank ketones. So ketones they have these appetite suppressing effects. Yes. But like if you have a donut and then you have ketones, you just had like a whole lot of calories, or a cookie and then ketones. What I would say, that would be a good potential fueling for if you're about to go on a bike ride. Like that's kind of how the Tour de France athletes do it, where their mission is like, there's these like wafy skin guys that are biking all freaking day. They need as much calories as possible. Their whole thing is like, how do I eat like 8,000 calories without puking my guts out? Like, how do I get more calories in more like parallelized streams into my cells? You don't have to be Tour de France rider. It's like if you're going on if you have a big workout, I don't know, a lot of people like to get out for like a 2-3 hour bike ride on the weekends, whatnot, or a big CrossFit session. Like if you're really trying to fuel up, then yeah, like carbs plus ketones is a great stack. For me personally, on a work day, for me, the mission is more like keep to that 16 and 8 eating window. So outside of that eating window, it's like, yeah, I might sip on some ketones and some coffee and water and stuff, but like, I'm not going to have the big cookie until maybe inside the eating window. Like I'm not like strict keto guy here, but I try to me personally, I'll try to have that stuff more like later in the day, because if I'm going to get sleepy afterwards, like I want like most of the work out of the day already.
So Michael, I want to hit you with a couple of rapid fire questions here, because these are questions that are coming up for me about how to use it. Is there a time of the day that I should stop using Ketone IQ because it'll affect my sleep?
Not really. Like there's this big study done with Belgian cyclists where they had people drink it 3 times a day, including 30 minutes before sleep. And people were recovering significantly better. Again, it went in that study where they were comparing ketones versus no ketones. It was a 3-week study. People were exercising multiple times a day and being given ketones versus placebo. In that study, people were being given ketones half an hour before bedtime, and the recovery scores, they were having 15% better output at the end of 3 weeks and doing significantly better at the time trial at the end. So some people report that they feel more like anxiolytic, like reduced stress, reduced anxiety when they drink ketones. So I would say on that, like, give it a try. Some people, it is a source of calories. It is a source of energy. I wouldn't be surprised if someone said, oh, like this actually makes me feel more awake. But I've also heard a lot of people say like, oh, this reduces my stress, my jitteriness, my aura score is better when I have this like shortly before bedtime. That's really helpful. How many days a week is it safe for me to have ketone IQ? Is it something I could do daily, just because they're ketones and, they're naturally occurring in the body? Or is there like a 3 days on, 1 day off kind of thing that you would recommend? Your body doesn't really build up a tolerance to it. Cause again, it's not this hormone. It's not like caffeine where you can, or THC or something where you can develop a tolerance effect to it. It's like protein, right? It's like you should just have however many proteins per kilogram of body weight, like per day. ketones the same thing. Like you can have it every day. Like you've done all the safety work on it. Where it's generally regarded as safe, FDA for up to 3.5 servings a day indefinitely. I think that's going to keep pushing up because the longer it's on market, the more confidence there is about continuing to scooch that up. Yeah, I have it every day.
Cool. And I got one more question on that would be prior to a workout, what's the optimal time to take it?
Like 15, 30 minutes ahead, like get it kind of pumping through your system, have it with whatever your standard pre-workout is. I think that's one thing to say too, is like, it doesn't have to be this like separate whole other ritual. It's like, if you already have your pre-workout ritual, like if you have your pre-workout an hour or 20 minutes or whatever on your way driving to the gym, or like just put a shot of ketones in there too, or have a shot of ketones along the side. And then the last thing I'd want to do is like add complexity to people's lives. I would say like try to like slipstream it into the things that you're already doing. If you're already having a pre-workout, creatine, caffeine, whatever, like that stuff, that if that's definitely working for you, try slipping ketones in there as well and see how you feel.
So Michael, you gave us the history and the science behind ketones. What's the future? So what are you seeing now that you've got this version 2 product out? And I think I'm as curious on the product side as I am on the culture side in terms of adoption. And is there going to be ketone Starbucks coming to us soon? What does this look like?
Yeah, keep posted. We have a lot of interesting partnerships and collaborations coming up. We're at a point now where ketones can be understood by most people. Like if I get on a call for 10 minutes with someone and that person cares about health and fitness, I can probably like shine enough light on ketones where they'll give it a try. And we weren't in that spot, 3-4 years ago. At the same time, like I don't have 10 minutes to jump on a call with everyone, with all 7 billion people on the planet. So where we're going next is, how do we scale that out? How do we have this be a household staple? So working on ways, right? Like right now, we've always been an online company. And actually something I'm really proud of the team for doing this year is we've gotten into retail. So we're in all the SoCal Sprouts, which is, if people are noticed, it was the second biggest natural food store in the country after Whole Foods. And so things like that, like just getting into more normal contexts, like your grocery store, your gym, where it's next to the apple cider vinegar or the whey protein. It's in like the normal realm of stuff. It's not this like magical, expensive thing that you can only find on this one website. It's like getting it out into the culture a little bit more. So much of what it is like, this is why business building is hard. It's because so much of what it took to get to where we are today is like hard biochemical research work, patenting, creating IP, doing really detailed deep dives with the US DoD. What's going to get us to the next chapter is like making this feel really cool, like Gatorade, and it's just a total other side of your brain. It's like making sure that the colors on the packaging are right, making sure that the vibe is right, and that we're co-signing with the right celebrities and not the wrong celebrities. And it's all super fun to me. I think that's why I got into starting a business. But I am taking a moment to acknowledge that like what got us here is a certain type of active muscle in our brains. And then what's going to get us to the next step is a totally different set. It's like, it's got to come across in, 0.5 seconds when someone's walking past it in a store. It's a different set of challenges from like, okay, how do you do a 3-hour presentation to a bunch of elite operators at a Navy SEAL base?
Yeah. This makes a ton of sense. Having it right next to the acai bowl. So that way I can have both my acai and my ketones at the same time. And arguably here, you have some of the right people on board already in the GOAT of the West Coast.
Arguably,
the West Coast.
The GOAT of the West Coast.
Nice asterisk, Brian. That was a nice little middle ground you just did there. So, Michael, thanks for this conversation, man. I've been talking about ketones, hearing about ketosis, ketones for many years. I feel much more equipped in my understanding and knowledge of how they work. And obviously, I'm really enjoying your product so far. So, for someone who's interested in now giving it a try, how do they go and buy this stuff, Ketone IQ?
Sure. Well, you start out by Googling Ketone IQ. You can go to ketone-iq.com. Our company is called Health Via Modern Nutrition. So you can look at hvmn.com. It'll all go to the same site, hvmn.com. You can find it. We're on all the socials at hvmn. You can find me personally. I love to talk to people, hear about how things are going in the field, like how it's going for your workout or your day in the office. Definitely tag me, say what's up. My personal is BDM Runner. It's BDM_runner. So find me on Twitter, Instagram, all that. Love to see how people are using the product, what they're learning, what other products you're learning. And Yeah, I don't know. I'm also happy to talk about all sorts of stuff, barefoot running and crypto and whatever. I love interacting with people. So definitely reach out.
Good stuff, man. And I know that I'm going to put all that stuff that you just talked about in the show notes. So the links to the website, to your Twitter, Instagram will be very easily accessible. And we also talked about how your marketing team is going to set us up with a discount code for our users. And I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe it's going to be 10% off of your purchase for anything on Ketone IQ. So yeah, that'll all be readily available, very visible in the show notes. So Michael, thanks for the conversation, for the education, and for helping us, Brian and I, to both feel alive, and Brian in particular to feel not that hungry anymore.
Yeah. Smooth.
Thank you so much. This is a lot of fun. Really appreciate you having me on.
Hey guys, just a reminder that the link for the 10% off discount code to buy Ketone IQ is in the show notes below. And the smallest quantity I believe that they offer on the website at the time of this recording is 3 bottles for $120. That's 30 servings of Ketone IQ. And with the discount code, you get about $12 off. So that link is in the show notes.